My dad only showed up when I was in the hospital, so I learned that pain equals love and started hurting myself for his attention until I got cancer at 24 and finally had the perfect father. But when I went into remission, he looked disappointed and left because he was addicted to my suffering. Then my mom revealed he'd been targeting sick women for 30 years and making them worse, including a coworker named Emma he tried to force into experimental treatment, and another woman named Rebecca who died after he convinced her to delay treatment while playing the devoted caregiver. My dad only loved me when I was dying growing up. I was invisible to my father unless I was bleeding. When I was 7, I fell off my bike and scraped my knee raw. Suddenly, dad was there with bandages and ice cream, telling me I was his brave little warrior. But the moment the scabs healed, I became furniture again. By age 12, I'd learned the equation. Pain equals love. Hospital visits meant father-daughter dinners. Broken bones meant bedtime stories. My medical chart read like a desperate love letter. Each injury a plea for attention that worked every single time. I remember being 14 and deliberately not wearing my helmet during skateboard practice. The concussion I got earned me 3 whole days of dad sleeping in the chair beside my bed. At 16, I let my appendix burst instead of going to the hospital when the pain first started. Those extra hours of agony bought me 2 weeks of his undivided attention. My friends thought I was accident prone. They didn't know I was just desperately trying to exist in my father's world, even if it meant destroying myself to get there. Fast forward to last month. I'm 24 now, and I've just been diagnosed with stage 2 lymphoma. The news hit me like a freight train, but underneath the terror, a sick part of me felt relieved because I knew what this meant. For the first time in years, I'd have my dad back, and I was right. He moved into my apartment within 48 hours, took leave from his CEO position, and suddenly I was his whole world. He held my hair during chemo, memorized every medication, and told me daily how proud he was of my strength. I convinced myself this was it. Cancer would finally make him see me as more than a medical emergency. He became the father I'd always dreamed of. Morning coffee together, evening walks when I felt strong enough, actual conversations about my life, my dreams, my fears beyond just symptom management. He learned my favorite TV shows, met my friends, even helped me repaint my bedroom when I said the beige walls were depressing. For 6 months, I had everything I'd ever wanted. I almost forgot it came with a price tag of poisoning my body with chemicals and radiation. Then came my follow-up appointment 6 months later. The oncologist's words echoed like angels singing, complete remission. The cancer's gone. I turned to my dad, tears streaming, expecting to see joy mirrored in his eyes. Instead, his face went slack, like someone had unplugged him. He managed a weak smile and patted my shoulder, but I saw the truth in his eyes. He was disappointed. On the drive home, he was already on his phone, rescheduling meetings, booking flights. By dinner, he'd packed his things. You're strong now, he said, not meeting my eyes. You don't need me anymore. The words hit harder than any diagnosis ever could. That night, I sat in my empty apartment, healthier than I'd been in months, but feeling more diseased than ever. I scrolled through old photos, every single one taken in a hospital room, doctor's office, or pharmacy. Not one photo of just us, happy, healthy. That's when it clicked like a dislocated joint snapping back into place. My father didn't love me. He loved my suffering. He was addicted to being needed, to playing savior, to the drama of my pain. Without my illness, I was just another healthy adult he had no use for. The realization burned through me like the chemo, calling something toxic that had been growing inside me far longer than any cancer. I drove to his office the next morning, my clean bill of health crumpled in my fist. His secretary tried to stop me, but I burst through those mahogany doors like a woman possessed. He looked up from his computer, already defensive. I didn't give him a chance to speak. Name one birthday you celebrated with me when I wasn't recovering from something. Silence. Name one achievement you celebrated that didn't involve surviving. More silence. His face cycled through emotions like a broken slot machine. Finally, he cleared his throat. That's not fair, sweetheart. I've sacrificed everything for you. No, I corrected him. You've sacrificed everything for your hero complex. You don't love me. You love feeling important. He stood up then, his face reddening. He tried to defend himself, going on about all the business deals he'd missed and opportunities he'd sacrificed for me. I laughed, but it was bitter and broken. I laid it all out for him. How he'd missed my college graduation for a conference, skipped my promotion celebration for a business trip, but somehow managed to clear his entire schedule every time I was in an ambulance. His face went red as I told him the truth. He didn't care about me. He cared about being needed. He cared about the drama. He cared about bragging to his golf buddies about being such a devoted father to his sick daughter. I left his office with my head high and my heart shattered, but as I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A text from my estranged mother, the one who'd left when I was 3, the one dad always painted as the villain who couldn't handle a sick child. Her message was simple. She'd heard I was in remission and had been waiting 21 years for me to be healthy enough to hear the truth about why she really left. My finger hovered over the call button because suddenly I realized there might be more to my story than just being my father's favorite patient. The truth about my childhood was about to get a second opinion, and something told me this diagnosis was going to hurt worse than any disease ever could. That's just part 1. If you're ready for the twist, no one saw coming. The link's below. I sat in my car outside Dad's office building, my thumb hovering over the call button. Through the glass doors, I watched security escort a sobbing woman from the building. She clutched medical papers against her chest, mascara streaking down her face. Something about her seemed familiar, though I couldn't place it. My phone rang before I could press call. Mother's name flashed on the screen. I answered immediately. Her voice broke through the speaker, raw and urgent. She'd been waiting by this phone for 2 decades, she explained, her words tumbling over each other. As she spoke, I watched the crying woman stumble toward the parking lot. The afternoon sun caught her face, and I realized why she looked familiar. We had the same hollow cheeks, the same exhausted eyes I'd seen in my mirror during treatment. Mother's words registered slowly. She had boxes of evidence about Dad's pattern. My hand tightened on the steering wheel as I watched the crying woman fumble with her car keys. Pattern. The word echoed in my mind. Sarah's text popped up on my screen. She'd seen me leaving Dad's building and wondered if I was okay. I looked upset, she wrote. I ignored it, my attention fixed on the woman now sitting in her car, shoulders shaking. I faced a choice. Drive to meet Mother and see these mysterious boxes, or follow this stranger who might hold answers. The woman's car had a medical charity license plate frame. My stomach twisted. I started my engine and followed her. She drove carefully, signaling every turn, until she pulled into a coffee shop parking lot 3 blocks away. I parked nearby and watched her enter, then followed after counting to 30. Inside, she sat in a corner booth, phone pressed to her ear. I chose a table close enough to hear. Her voice carried despite her attempts to whisper. She mentioned promises about promotions if she just got sicker. My coffee cup rattled against the saucer as I set it down. The woman's eyes swept the room and landed on me. Recognition flashed across her face, followed by fear. She ended her call abruptly and started gathering her things. I stood and approached her table. She pressed herself against the booth's back cushion. You're his daughter, she whispered. The one with cancer. I nodded slowly. Her name tag read Emma. Emma's hands trembled as she clutched her purse. He said you were unstable, jealous of his attention to other employees. My phone buzzed. Security footage alert. Dad knew we were here. Sarah burst through the coffee shop door moments later, slightly out of breath. Your dad's been calling everyone. Says you're having a breakdown. Emma started to leave, but I gently touched her arm. She flinched, then slowly sat back down. With shaking hands, she pulled out a termination warning dated last week. The ultimatum was clear. Accept experimental treatment or face firing. My phone buzzed again. Mother had sent a photo. Young me in a hospital bed with Dad hovering nearby. All concern and devotion. The date circled in red proved what I'd suspected. It was taken 2 days before a school event he'd claimed to attend. Emma agreed to come to my apartment. Mother arrived 20 minutes later with 2 storage boxes. Emma hesitated at my door, shifting her weight from foot to foot. Mother didn't waste time with pleasantries. She opened the first box and pulled out a bound thesis. Dad's name on the cover, dated 30 years ago. Caregiver identity formation, in bold letters. She flipped to highlighted passages about manufactured crises, about the psychological rewards of being needed. A knock interrupted us. 3 sharp raps I recognized. Dad stood in my doorway with 2 uniformed EMTs. His face wore that concerned expression I knew so well. I called for a wellness check. My daughter's off her medication. The EMT stepped forward professionally, asking to verify my mental state. Dad hovered behind them, watching every move. One EMT asked me basic questions while the other observed. Name, date, current president. I answered calmly. Mother stepped into view. Hello, Marcus. Still playing savior, I see. Dad's face went rigid. The EMTs exchanged glances, recognizing this as a family dispute rather than a medical emergency. Emma slipped toward the door during the confrontation, her phone buzzing insistently. Dad's angry texts kept arriving. Dad's thesis on caregiver identity formation just went from academic paper to autobiography. Turns out he didn't just study the subject, he decided to make it his whole personality. Talk about taking your homework way too seriously. One message flashed on her screen before she grabbed it. Where are you? This betrayal won't go unpunished. The lead EMT spoke quietly to his partner. They saw no emergency here, just a family matter. They prepared their equipment to leave despite Dad's protests about my history, my vulnerability, my need for help. After they left, I scrolled through old texts from Dad during my treatment. Suggestion after suggestion about symptoms I might be experiencing. Had I checked for swelling? Was I feeling dizzy? Maybe I should mention the headaches to my doctor. I'd followed every suggestion, desperate to keep his attention. Sarah's phone rang. Her mother's voice came through just loud enough for us to hear. She couldn't say much, but we should look into visitor restrictions at the pediatric ward. The line went dead. Mother revealed she'd hired a private investigator before leaving. She'd needed proof before she abandoned me to him. The investigator's reports filled half a box. Dad's next move came through group text. He'd messaged my extended family and employer about concerns for my mental state, asked them to share any unusual behavior they'd noticed. Emma finally spoke up. There was someone else at the company. She stopped herself, fear crossing her face again. But I shouldn't. The weight of her words settled over us. Pattern. Mother had said pattern. Now Emma confirmed it. Someone else. My hands shook as I reached for my laptop to start documenting everything. Dad's Facebook post appeared within the hour. My laptop screen glowed with his carefully crafted narrative about my mental health crisis. He'd tagged 37 relatives and my employer, expressing deep concern about my stability. The comments started flooding in immediately. Aunts offering prayers, cousins sharing mental health resources, my supervisor asking if I needed time off. I recognized the tactic from years of medical manipulation. Create the narrative before the truth could surface. Control the story. Make me defend my sanity instead of exposing his sickness. My fingers moved across the keyboard, documenting everything. Screenshots of his post, the comments, the timeline. Evidence file number 1. A notification popped up. Someone had shared Dad's post, then another. The digital wildfire spread through my extended network faster than I could track. Mother pulled more documents from her boxes. Hospital admission records from my childhood, each one during Dad's custody weekends. Broken wrist at age 8, food poisoning at 10, mysterious rash at 11 that required a week of monitoring. The pattern emerged like a disease under a microscope. Emma sat frozen on my couch, watching Dad's campaign unfold on her phone. Her termination warning lay on the coffee table between us, its corporate letterhead a stark reminder of his reach. Sarah's phone buzzed with another message from her mother. The pediatric ward had strict visitor policies now, implemented 3 years ago after concerns about a frequent visitor. No names mentioned, but the timeline matched Dad's volunteer period there. I opened a new document and started typing. Every injury, every illness, every hospital stay, dates, locations, Dad's presence or absence. The data painted a picture I'd been too desperate to see before. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The message played through the speaker. A woman's voice, hesitant but determined. She'd worked at the hospital during my treatment, saw my social media post about remission. There was something I should know about another patient, a young woman named Rebecca, who'd been there around the same time. The caller paused, then added that Rebecca's case had troubled several staff members. She left her number. Mother's face went pale at Rebecca's name. She'd seen it in the investigator's reports, but hadn't connected the dots until now. Emma suddenly stood, pacing to the window, her hands twisted together as she stared at the street below. She'd met Rebecca once, she admitted, at a company health fair. Dad had introduced them, suggested they compare treatment experiences. Rebecca had seemed so tired, so defeated. Within a month, she'd stopped coming to work. My boyfriend Mike's name flashed on my phone screen. I answered, and he immediately told me Dad had called his office 3 times. His boss was asking questions. Mike had refused to take the calls, but the pressure was building. I added Mike's information to my growing file. Dad's reach extending to my inner circle, trying to isolate me. Mother showed me entries from my childhood diary she'd saved. My handwriting at age 9, describing how Daddy visited after my fall down the stairs. How special I felt when he stayed all night at the hospital. How I wished I could be sick more often so he'd love me like that all the time. The words blurred as tears threatened. Even then, I'd known the equation. Sarah arrived with printouts from Dad's social media history. She'd gone back years, documenting his posts. Every medical crisis lovingly detailed. Every hospital vigil photographed. His identity wrapped around being the devoted father to his suffering daughter. Between crises, I barely existed in his digital world. The hospital records office called back. They couldn't release information without proper authorization, but they suggested legal channels if I had concerns about past treatment. The receptionist's tone carried weight, like she was trying to tell me something without saying it. Emma's phone rang. Dad's number. She stared at it, paralyzed, until it went to voicemail. His message played accidentally on speaker. Concern about her missing their meeting. Worry about her health. Reminder that her insurance was through the company. Thinly veiled threats wrapped in care. Sarah's mother agreed to meet us privately. Within an hour, she sat in my living room, choosing her words carefully. She'd worked pediatric nursing for 15 years. Noticed patterns most people missed. Dad's presence during certain shifts. How some young patients seemed to worsen during his volunteer visits. How he always managed to be there for the dramatic moments. She'd reported her concerns, but without concrete evidence, nothing happened except visitor restrictions. I found my childhood medical records in Mother's boxes. The documentation was meticulous. Every injury, every illness mapped against custody schedules. Mom's weekends, healthy. Dad's weekends, emergency room visits. School days, fine. School breaks with Dad, mysterious ailments. Dad's college roommate had responded to Mother's old email. She read it aloud. Marcus had always needed to be needed. In college, he'd dated a girl with chronic illness. When she got better, he'd lost interest, found another girl with depression, then another with an eating disorder. Always drawn to vulnerability, always leaving when they healed. My laptop filled with evidence. Texts, emails, medical records, witness accounts, each piece building a case I'd never wanted to see. Dad's next text arrived with a photo attached. My bank statement showing the trust fund he controlled. The message was clear. Comply or lose financial security. The therapy appointment he'd scheduled was tomorrow at 2 p.m. A Dr. Whitman who specialized in delusional disorders. Mike's mother called Sarah. As a therapist herself, she'd seen similar patterns. Proxy Munchausen's wasn't always about children. Sometimes it manifested interested in romantic relationships, friendships, any dynamic where one person could maintain control through medical crisis. She offered to write a professional assessment if needed. The hospital contact called back. She'd thought about it more and felt obligated to share what she'd observed. Rebecca had been improving until family visits increased. Specifically, visits from a family friend who'd insisted on being part of her care team. The symptoms that followed these visits were concerning. Unexplained setbacks, medication reactions. The friend had been so devoted, so concerned, too concerned. Emma broke down, finally releasing what she'd held back. Dad had made her feel guilty for getting better. Every improvement met with subtle disappointment. Every healthy day treated like betrayal. She'd started hiding her recovery, pretending to feel worse just to keep her job. The stress had actually made her sick again. A self-fulfilling prophecy. Dad's offer arrived by email. $50,000 for a vacation. Time to rest, get help, stop spreading lies about him. The legal language was careful, requiring my silence in exchange for the money. Mike chose me over his job. When his boss pressured him about Dad's calls, Mike submitted his resignation. He arrived at my apartment with a box of his office belongings and a determined expression. Some things mattered more than money. Sarah created an encrypted group chat for those who believed me. The membership grew quickly. My aunt, who'd always wondered about my illnesses, a cousin who'd noticed the pattern, Dad's secretary, who'd quietly started job hunting after years of discomfort with his behavior, each person sharing small observations that painted a larger picture. I refused to manufacture evidence despite having access to Dad's email through an old shared account. Integrity mattered. The truth was enough without embellishment. The parking lot encounter happened as I loaded groceries into my car. Dad's Mercedes pulled up behind me, blocking my exit. He didn't get out, just sat there watching. His text arrived moments later. I was nothing before cancer. I'd be nothing without him. The words designed to wound, to make me doubt my worth beyond sickness. Mother revealed more about Dad's past. His college girlfriend had filed harassment charges after their breakup. He wouldn't stop trying to care for her during a minor illness. Showed up with soup, medications, insisted she needed him. The charges were dropped when he agreed to stay away, but the pattern was documented. I realized something crucial. Someone should tell Dad that collecting sick people isn't a hobby like stamps or baseball cards, though he certainly built quite the portfolio over the years with his care and control investment strategy. Dad's control only worked on isolated, vulnerable women seeking father figures. Emma had lost her father young. Rebecca had been estranged from family. I'd spent my childhood desperate for his attention. We were perfect targets for his pathological need to be needed. Emma found courage in our shared experience. She told me the full story. How Dad had noticed her using an inhaler during a meeting. How his interest had intensified. The questions about her health. The suggestions about treatments. The gradual invasion of her medical privacy. How he'd made her feel special at first, like he truly cared. Then the pressure to try experimental treatments. To let him accompany her to appointments. To need him more. Mike's support never wavered. When Dad threatened his new employer, Mike stood firm. His choice was clear. His mother offered professional insights about manipulation patterns, helping us understand the psychological mechanisms at play. Our support group grew stronger. Sarah coordinated meetings. Mike researched legal options. Emma and I documented everything. We weren't just victims anymore. We were survivors building a case. Dad's voicemail dripped with false concern. His words carefully chosen to sound caring if played for others. How confused I seemed. How lost I'd been before he helped me through treatment. How worried he was about my mental state. The subtext clear only to those who knew his patterns. Extended family began reaching out privately. Apologies for believing his post. Admissions that they'd always felt something was off. Stories of their own observations over the years. The network of understanding expanded beyond my immediate circle. The hospital quietly restricted Dad's privileges. Multiple concerning reports had surfaced. No formal announcement, just a subtle removal of his volunteer access. Sarah's mother confirmed he was no longer on the approved visitor list. Rebecca's friend reached out again. She remembered Rebecca mentioning that Dad had convinced her to delay certain treatments, suggested alternative therapies, questioned her doctors. Rebecca had been too polite, too grateful for his attention to refuse his advice. The friend couldn't prove anything, but the timeline of Rebecca's decline haunted her. Dad's new girlfriend contacted me. She'd noticed him researching her medications, found him going through her bathroom cabinet. His questions about her health had seemed caring at first, but the intensity disturbed her. She wanted to know if I'd experienced similar behavior. I shared evidence carefully, without attacking Dad directly. Let his patterns speak for themselves. His girlfriend's recognition was immediate. She'd seen these behaviors but hadn't connected them until now. Colleagues at Dad's company began sharing their own stories. How he'd fixated on anyone with health issues. The inappropriate questions during performance reviews. The way he'd hover around anyone returning from medical leave. HR had received multiple complaints over the years, but his position had protected him. Mother's private investigator provided a comprehensive file. 30 years of patterns documented. Former girlfriends, colleagues, acquaintances. Always the same cycle. Interest sparked by vulnerability. Intensity during illness. Abandonment upon recovery. The trust fund deadline forced action. I had 48 hours to comply with Dad's demands or lose financial security. The choice seemed obvious, but the principle mattered more than money. The bank meeting was carefully orchestrated. Dad maintained his composure in public, but his grip on my arm was too tight as he guided me inside. His whispered threats smiled for security cameras. I remained calm, presenting documentation of my mental competence to the bank manager. Medical records showing no psychiatric issues. Therapist notes confirming my stability. Professional assessments countering Dad's narrative. The realization hit me during that meeting. This wasn't about money or revenge. This was about stopping him from hurting another woman. Emma could have been me. Rebecca might have lived if someone had intervened. How many others existed in his wake? Dad's business partners expressed concerns about his erratic behavior. His focus on my crisis was affecting company operations. Board members questioned his stability. The professional facade he'd maintained for decades showed cracks. Truth spread through personal networks faster than Dad could control. His narrative competed with documented patterns. People talked, compared notes, connected dots. The isolated incidents formed a clear picture when viewed together. My apartment building's management banned Dad after multiple disturbance reports. His attempts to access my home, the confrontations in the lobby, the EMT visit. Security had his photo with instructions to refuse entry. His final manipulation attempt came through my oncologist's office. Dad called claiming I was showing signs of relapse, suggested they schedule immediate tests, insisted my mental state indicated returning illness. The office contacted me directly, professionally concerned but skeptical of his claims. A medical professional quietly confirmed what I'd suspected. Dad was perfectly healthy. No chronic conditions, no medications, no reason for his obsession with illness except psychological need. His pathology was the only sickness in play. Dad's company placed him on administrative leave. The board couldn't ignore the mounting concerns. His decades of careful image management crumbled under scrutiny. Mother and I rebuilt our relationship through honest conversations. She'd left not because she couldn't handle a sick child, but because she'd recognized Dad's role in my illnesses. The guilt of leaving me with him had haunted her, but she'd needed proof before acting. Emma found strength to formally document her experience. Her statement to HR detailed the medical coercion, the workplace manipulation, the threats to her employment. Our united front made dismissing our claims impossible. I created a timeline showing Dad's presence during every medical crisis. The correlation was undeniable. When he had access to my food, I got sick. When he was involved in my care, symptoms worsened. When he was absent, I thrived. His own mother admitted she'd noticed the pattern. Thought he was just devoted, she said. Didn't didn't want to see what was really happening. Her admission carried weight that our accusations alone couldn't. Emma's testimony to HR revealed the full extent of workplace medical manipulation, the pressure to need him, the subtle punishments for recovery, the way he'd made illness a condition of employment. Other employees came forward with similar experiences. Documentation proved Dad had access to my food and medications during every mysterious illness. The timeline was damning. Every unexplained reaction, every sudden symptom, every medical crisis traced back to his presence. Rebecca's friend mentioned that her family had questioned the rapid decline. They couldn't afford to investigate further, but they'd always wondered about the family friend who'd been so involved in her care. The friend who'd insisted on helping with medications, who'd suggested treatment changes, who'd been there for every crisis. Dad's colleagues voted no confidence. The company protection that had shielded him for decades crumbled. His position became untenable as more stories surfaced. He launched a final campaign questioning my stability, cherry-picked texts from my treatment days, emotional messages sent while suffering. The compilation was convincing without context. Several supporters wavered, wondering if they'd misunderstood his concern. Emma faced pressure from colleagues who still respected Dad. They questioned her interpretation of his behavior, suggested she was ungrateful for his interest in her well-being. The gaslighting was effective on those who hadn't experienced it directly. I had to prove my sanity without full support. Some family members bought Dad's narrative. Some friends wondered if cancer had affected my judgment. The burden of proof fell on me while Dad played the concerned father. My therapist provided detailed session notes spanning my entire treatment. Every session documented my mental stability. No delusional thinking, no paranoia, just a young woman processing trauma and recognizing patterns. Her professional validation carried weight that personal testimony couldn't. Dad's psychological unraveling began with that professional validation. His carefully constructed narrative couldn't withstand clinical scrutiny. The image he'd built for decades cracked under examination. He arrived at my apartment with flowers and a medical alert bracelet. Security called me from the lobby, refusing him entry. He waited outside for 3 hours, texting increasingly desperate messages. I needed him. I was nothing without him. I would relapse without his care. I revealed that I'd been recording our interactions since the confrontation began. Every voicemail, every encounter, every threat documented. The recording stripped away his public persona, revealing the manipulation beneath. In a moment of rare honesty, Dad admitted his own father had only shown love when caring for his dying mother. The pattern stretched back generations. Trauma teaching trauma. Love equated with sickness. Worth measured in suffering. Mother arrived with Dad's estranged brother, who confirmed the childhood pattern. Their father's attention came only during crisis. Dad had learned early that being needed meant being loved. The cycle continued through generations until someone broke it. I faced a choice. Destroy Dad publicly with the evidence we'd gathered, or handle this privately. Media attention would bring scrutiny, but might also inspire copycat cases. Other vulnerable people might become targets for those who saw manipulation as care. Emma and I chose private confrontation. Flowers and a medical alert bracelet. Nothing says I care about your health like trying to gift wrap control after getting banned from someone's building for basically stalking them with fake concern. We met Dad at a neutral location, a mediator present, no media circus, no public destruction, just truth and consequences. Together, Emma and I presented our evidence. Our united front prevented him from manipulating either of us individually. His tactics failed when faced with mutual support. Every attempt to divide us strengthened our resolve. His tears seemed genuine, but we recognized the manipulation within them. Pleas for understanding, claims of good intentions, assertions that he'd only wanted to help. The performance might have worked on others, but we knew the script too well. Emma's testimony to HR came first. She sat across from 3 board members in the conference room, hands steady as she laid out documentation, medical coercion emails, text messages about experimental treatments, performance reviews that mentioned her health more than her work. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances as the pattern became undeniable. I watched through the glass partition as Emma presented her termination warning. The ultimatum was clear in black and white: accept treatment or lose her position. One board member's face went pale. He'd signed that document. The evidence pile grew. Screenshots of Dad's messages to Emma during her sick days, suggestions about symptoms she might be experiencing, recommendations for specialists who turned out to be experimental researchers. The manipulation was methodical, documented, undeniable. My own documentation followed. Bank records showing Dad's access to my apartment during every mysterious illness. Grocery receipts from days before I got sick. Security footage timestamps placing him in my kitchen alone. The correlation was perfect. Every unexplained symptom traced back to his presence. Mother presented the investigator's findings. 30 years of patterns across multiple women, each case following the same trajectory. Initial concern, escalating involvement, mysterious health crises, then abandonment upon recovery. The board members couldn't maintain eye contact as they reviewed the files. Rebecca's friend arrived unexpectedly. She'd driven 3 hours after hearing about our meeting. Her hands shook as she described Rebecca's final months. The family friend who'd insisted on helping with medications, who'd suggested treatment delays, who'd been present for every setback. She couldn't prove anything, but the timeline haunted her. Rebecca had been improving until his involvement intensified. The mediator, a retired judge, maintained careful neutrality, but I saw his jaw tighten as evidence mounted. Dad's attempts to interrupt were shut down professionally. This wasn't his show anymore. Dad's colleagues had already voted. The no confidence motion passed unanimously. His decades of protection crumbled in a single afternoon. The company's legal team sat in the corner, documenting everything for their own protection. His final campaign had already launched. Cherry-picked texts from my cancer treatment flooded social media. Emotional messages I'd sent while suffering. Voice recordings of me crying during chemo. Without context, I sounded unstable. Several relatives had already called, questioning my mental state. Emma faced her own pressure. Colleagues who'd respected Dad confronted her in the parking lot. They suggested she was misinterpreting his concern. Maybe she was ungrateful. The gaslighting might have worked before, but Emma stood firm. She had receipts. She had witnesses. She had me. My therapist's documentation proved crucial. 2 years of session notes confirming my stability. No delusional thinking. No paranoia. Just a young woman recognizing patterns of abuse. Her professional assessment carried weight that personal testimony couldn't match. Dad's composure cracked when the therapist's report was read aloud. His foot tapped frantically under the table. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool room. The image he'd maintained for decades was dissolving. Security footage from my apartment building played on the laptop screen. Dad arriving with flowers and a medical alert bracelet, waiting outside for 3 hours, sending increasingly desperate messages. The security guard's report detailed his agitation when refused entry. I placed my phone on the table and played the recordings. Every interaction since our confrontation began. His threats wrapped in concern. His manipulation disguised as love. His voice filled the room, stripping away any remaining pretense. Dad's brother arrived halfway through the meeting. He'd driven from 2 states away after Mother called. His testimony was brief but devastating. Their father's pattern of attention, only during crisis. How Dad had learned early that being needed meant being loved. The generational trauma laid bare. The mediator called a recess. Dad slumped in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but Dad wasn't listening. He stared at the evidence spread across the table like it was written in a foreign language. Emma and I stepped outside for air. We didn't need words. Our shared experience had created a bond stronger than his manipulation. Every attempt to divide us had only strengthened our resolve. Sarah arrived with printed emails from Dad's work work account. He'd been researching employee medical records, accessing files he had no business viewing. The IT department had flagged the activity months ago, but hadn't acted due to his position. Mike's mother provided her professional assessment. The patterns she'd identified matched textbook cases of medical manipulation. Her clinical language stripped away any emotional ambiguity. This wasn't misunderstood concern, this was pathological behavior. Dad's new girlfriend had already left him. She'd found him researching her medications, going through her bathroom cabinet. His questions about her health had intensified after she'd mentioned feeling tired. She'd recognized the pattern and run. The company's HR director presented their findings. 12 employees over 15 years had filed complaints about Dad's inappropriate medical interest, performance reviews that focused on health issues, meetings that turned into symptom discussions. The pattern was systemic. When we returned from recess, Dad had aged another decade. His lawyer had clearly explained the situation. Criminal charges were unlikely, but civil consequences were mounting. The company wanted him gone. His reputation was destroyed. His control had evaporated. He tried one last manipulation. Tears streamed down his face as he spoke about his own trauma, his father's neglect except during his mother's illness, how he'd only wanted to help, how he'd never meant harm. The performance might have worked on strangers, but we knew the script. Emma responded with actions, not words. She placed a photo on the table. Rebecca at the company health fair, vibrant and smiling. Then another photo. Rebecca 3 months later, hollow-eyed and frail. The timeline spoke louder than any accusation. I added my own evidence. Medical records showing my perfect health during his absences. The mysterious illnesses that coincided with his visits. The pattern was mathematical in its precision. The mediator suggested terms. Dad would resign immediately. No severance package, no references. He'd surrender any claims to my trust fund. He'd agree to a permanent restraining order. He'd enter treatment, though whether for help or image management remained unclear. Dad's resistance crumbled incrementally. Each new piece of evidence chipped away at his defenses. His lawyer's whispered advice grew more urgent. The board members' faces had hardened from discomfort to disgust. Mother's final evidence was personal. Love letters from their courtship before I was born. His obsession with her minor health issues even then. How he'd lost interest when she'd recovered from a minor surgery. The pattern predated my existence. The restraining order negotiations were precise. No contact with me or Emma. No proximity to our homes or workplaces. No third-party contact through relatives or friends. The distance requirements were generous. 500 feet felt like freedom. Dad signed with shaking hands. His signature looked nothing like the confident scrawl I'd known. Each document stripped away another layer of his power. By the end, he was just a sad man facing consequences. The trust fund transfer happened immediately. The bank had representatives present. Dad's control evaporated with a few keystrokes. 20 years of financial manipulation ended in minutes. His exit was anticlimactic. No dramatic proclamations. No final attempts at control. He simply gathered his things and left, his lawyer guiding him by the elbow. The man who'd loomed so large in my life looked small walking away. Emma and I sat in silence after everyone left. The conference room felt different without his presence. Lighter, cleaner, like windows had been opened after years of stale air. The aftermath came in waves. Relatives who'd believed his posts called to apologize. His former colleagues reached out with their own stories. The network of understanding expanded beyond what we'd imagined. 3 months later, the treatment facility confirmed his admission. Whether he'd sought help or simply needed somewhere to hide didn't matter. He was contained. He couldn't hurt anyone else. Emma returned to work with full support. The company implemented new policies about medical privacy and workplace boundaries. Her courage had protected future employees. I started training as a patient advocate. My experience could help others recognize medical manipulation. The hospital welcomed my involvement, especially given my history there. Sarah and Mike remained constants. Their support had never wavered. Mike found a better job with a boss who valued integrity over connections. Sarah's mother continued monitoring for concerning patterns at the hospital. Mother and I rebuilt slowly. 21 years of separation couldn't be healed overnight, but we had truth now. That was enough to start. The support group Emma and I created stayed small by design. We met monthly in my apartment. No publicity, no social media presence, just a safe space for those who'd experienced medical manipulation in relationships. 1 year later, I stood before a room of medical professionals. My presentation was clinical, focused on recognition and prevention. Emma sat in the front row, running our support group in my absence. The hospital contact watched from the back, still vigilant for warning signs. Dad remained in treatment. No word on progress or prognosis. His pathology had finally met its match in the collective strength of those who'd refused to let their pain be his purpose. We'd survived. We'd healed. We'd ensured he couldn't prey on vulnerable women seeking father figures anymore. My health stayed perfect. No mysterious illnesses, no unexplained symptoms, just the normal challenges of a life lived without manufactured crisis. It felt like freedom. It was freedom. See you all in the next story. Consider subscribing too.